Christmas morning at my mother-in-law Dorothy's house. My 6-year-old daughter Emma proudly hands Dorothy a handmade ornament she spent weeks creating. Dorothy takes one look, drops it on the floor, and stares directly into Emma's innocent eyes. "Children from mommy's cheating don't get to call me Grandma," she says coldly. The room freezes. Emma's face crumbles. Then my 12-year-old son Jake stands up from the couch, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. What he said next changed everything forever. "I'm Alita, and that Christmas morning will haunt me until my dying day." Not because of what Dorothy said to me, but because of the pure confusion and pain that washed over my little girl's face. Emma had spent 3 weeks crafting that ornament at school, painting a tiny ceramic angel with such careful attention that her tongue poked out in concentration every afternoon when she worked on it at the kitchen table. Let me back up and explain how we got to this nightmare moment. I married Dorothy's son Marcus when we were both 22, fresh out of college, and convinced we had the world figured out. Marcus was studying accounting while I finished my marketing degree. We were that couple everyone envied, the ones who seemed to have it all planned out perfectly. Jake came along when I was 24. Marcus had just started at Henderson & Associates, a mid-sized accounting firm downtown. Those early years were tough, but happy. Marcus worked long hours during tax season, but we managed. Emma arrived when I turned 26, and suddenly our neat little life became beautifully chaotic. The trouble started when Emma was 3, and Marcus got promoted to senior associate. The promotion meant more money, but also meant he was practically living at the office. During tax season, I wouldn't see him from Monday morning until Friday night. I was essentially a single parent for months at a time, juggling a part-time marketing job at Pinnacle Communications with 2 young children. That's when I met Bradley. He was my supervisor at Pinnacle, 15 years older than me, divorced, and everything Marcus wasn't at that time. Bradley was present. He listened when I talked. He remembered that Emma was allergic to strawberries, and that Jake was struggling with math. When Marcus missed Jake's school play because of a client deadline, Bradley sent flowers to my office with a note saying he was proud of Jake. The affair started innocently. Bradley offered to help with a campaign I was struggling with, and we ended up working late together. One thing led to another. For 4 months, I lived a double life that I'm still ashamed of today. Not because I was caught, but because I betrayed the man I truly loved during his hardest professional period. Marcus discovered everything through text messages on my phone. I had forgotten to delete a conversation where Bradley mentioned missing me over the weekend. The night Marcus confronted me was the worst night of my life. He didn't yell or throw things. He just sat at our kitchen table and cried while the kids slept upstairs. We started couples therapy with Dr. Sarah Mitchell the following week. For 6 months, we met every Thursday evening, slowly rebuilding the trust I had shattered. Marcus learned to be more present, and I learned to communicate my needs instead of seeking attention elsewhere. We came out stronger, more honest with each other. But Dorothy never forgave me. From the moment Marcus told her about the affair, Dorothy treated me like a disease that had infected her perfect family. She called me the homewrecker whenever Marcus wasn't in earshot. She made pointed comments about women who can't keep their legs closed during family dinners. She refused to acknowledge Emma's accomplishments while praising everything Jake did. Marcus defended me initially. He told his mother that our marriage was stronger than ever and that she needed to respect his choice to stay with me. But over time, the constant fighting between us wore him down. He stopped confronting Dorothy about her snide remarks. He started making excuses for her behavior. Emma noticed the difference in how Dorothy treated her versus Jake, even though she was too young to understand why. She would ask me why Grandma Dorothy never wanted to hold her or read her stories. My heart broke every single time. The Christmas morning attack was the culmination of 3 years of this treatment. Emma had been so excited about her angel ornament. She had wrapped it carefully in tissue paper and carried it to Dorothy's house like it was made of precious crystal. When Dorothy dropped that ornament on the hardwood floor, the delicate wing broke off. But the sound of Emma's sharp intake of breath was worse than the ceramic breaking. Then came those devastating words about children from "Mommy's cheating." Emma didn't understand what cheating meant, but she understood rejection. She understood cruelty. And in that moment, my 6-year-old daughter learned that love could be conditional and that adults could be purposefully mean to children. That's when Jake stood up. My 12-year-old son looked his grandmother straight in the eye and said, "Grandma Dorothy, I've been recording everything mean you say to Mom and Emma. Dad needs to hear this." He pulled out his phone with the confidence of someone who had planned this moment carefully. The entire room went dead silent as Jake's finger hovered over the play button. The Christmas morning that started with torn wrapping paper and excited squeals had turned into something that felt like a courtroom drama. Jake held his phone up so everyone could see the screen, his young face set with determination that reminded me heartbreakingly of his father. "This is from last month at Emma's birthday party." Jake announced, his voice steady despite his age. Dorothy's recorded voice filled the living room with crystal clarity. "That little girl acts just like her mother, doesn't she? Attention-seeking and manipulative. I suppose the apple doesn't fall far from the tree when it comes to homewreckers." Marcus's sister, Patricia, gasped audibly from her spot near the fireplace. Her husband, Tom, set down his coffee mug so hard it clinked against the side table. Dorothy's brother, George, who had been helping himself to another piece of coffee cake, froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. Jake swiped to the next recording. "This one's from Thanksgiving." Dorothy's voice again. "Emma, sweetheart, you know you're not really my granddaughter, the same way Jake is, right? Your mommy made some very bad choices that changed everything." I watched my 6-year-old daughter's face crumple as she heard her grandmother's words played back. Emma didn't understand all the implications, but she understood enough to know these words were meant to hurt her. "There's more," Jake continued, scrolling through his phone. "This is what Grandma Dorothy told Mrs. Henderson at the grocery store last week when she didn't know I was in the next aisle." The recording was harder to hear because of background store noise, but Dorothy's words came through clearly enough. "The little girl isn't really family, you understand? Her mother was sleeping around while my son worked himself to the bone. I don't know why Marcus insists on pretending she belongs with us." Patricia's hand flew to her mouth. "Mom, how could you say that about Emma? She's just a baby." George set his plate down entirely and leaned forward in his armchair. "Dorothy, what the hell is wrong with you?" His wife Helen had tears in her eyes as she looked at Emma, who was now clinging to my leg like a lifeline. But Jake wasn't finished. He had been methodical in his documentation, and now I understood why he had always seemed to have his phone ready during family gatherings. My son had been protecting his sister the only way he knew how. "This one's from 3 weeks ago when Mom was in the bathroom and Dad was outside taking a work call," Jake said. Dorothy's voice was sharper in this recording. "Jake, you need to understand that your sister is different from you. Your mother's poor choices mean that Emma will always be a reminder of betrayal. Real families don't include children born from adultery. She wasn't born from adultery." Jake's 12-year-old voice cracked with emotion on the recording. "She's my sister, and Mom and Dad are married, and you're just being mean." Dorothy's recorded response chilled me. "Don't raise your voice to me, young man. You'll understand when you're older that some mistakes can't be forgiven, and some people don't deserve to be part of this family." The silence in the room after that recording was deafening. Marcus looked like someone had physically struck him. His face had gone completely pale, and his hands were shaking. "Mom," he whispered, looking at Dorothy with an expression I had never seen before. "How could you poison my children against their own family?" Dorothy's face had transformed from its usual cold composure to something approaching panic. "Marcus, you don't understand. That boy doctored those recordings. Children today know how to manipulate technology. None of that is real." Tom, who worked in IT and understood technology better than most, spoke up immediately. "Mrs. Caldwell, those recordings have background noise and natural conversation flow. You can't fake that kind of audio quality with a phone app." Jake held up his phone again. "I have 18 more recordings from the past 6 months. Should I play them all?" Dorothy's composure finally cracked completely. Her face flushed red, and she stood up so abruptly that her rocking chair continued moving behind her. "You little spy. How dare you violate my privacy? Recording people without permission is illegal." "Actually," Tom interjected quietly, "in this state, one-party consent laws mean that as long as one person in the conversation knows about the recording, it's completely legal." George stared at his sister with disgust. "Dorothy, I raised you better than this. How can you treat a child this way?" Helen was openly crying now, reaching out to Emma, who shyly moved closer to her. "Emma, sweetie, your great-uncle George and I think you're absolutely perfect just the way you are." But Dorothy wasn't done. Cornered and desperate, she made a decision that shocked even me. "Fine," she shouted, storming toward a bookshelf in the corner. "You want to know the truth about precious Alita. I have my own evidence." She pulled down a manila envelope that had been hidden behind some holiday decorations. With shaking hands, she dumped the contents across her coffee table. "I hired a private investigator," Dorothy announced triumphantly. "For the past year, I've been having that cheating wife of yours followed. These photos will show everyone exactly what kind of woman you really married Marcus." The photographs scattered across the table like fallen leaves, and my heart stopped beating. Dorothy spread the photographs across her coffee table with the dramatic flair of someone playing a winning hand in poker. Her face was flushed with vindictive satisfaction as she pointed at the images. "Look at these," she declared. "Ralph Morrison is one of the best private investigators in the city. I paid him good money to document your wife's ongoing adultery." Marcus leaned forward to examine the photos, his face a mixture of dread and confusion. I felt my stomach drop to my feet, even though I knew I hadn't been unfaithful since my affair with Bradley ended 5 years ago. The first photo showed me walking out of a nondescript brick building downtown. Dorothy jabbed her finger at it triumphantly. "There, she's meeting with someone secretly." I recognized the building immediately and felt a wave of relief mixed with new anxiety. "Dorothy, that's the Sunrise Women's Shelter. I volunteer there every Tuesday." "Lies," Dorothy snapped, but her voice lacked the certainty it had moments before. Jake picked up another photo that showed me sitting in a parking lot in my car, apparently having an emotional conversation on my phone. "Mom, isn't this from when Aunt Claire called to tell you about Uncle Jerry's diagnosis?" I nodded, remembering that difficult conversation about my brother-in-law's cancer diagnosis. I had sat in that parking lot crying for 20 minutes after learning the news. Patricia examined a photo showing me entering a professional building. "This is Dr. Rebecca Hartman's office. I know because I see her too. She's a therapist." Marcus looked at me with confusion. "You're seeing a therapist? Why didn't you tell me?" My heart pounded as I realized I would have to explain this in front of everyone. "I started individual therapy 6 months ago to work on myself. Dr. Hartman is helping me understand why I made the choices I did during our marriage crisis. I wanted to make sure I never hurt you like that again." Dorothy grabbed another photo, this one showing me walking into a law office building. "Explain this one." Meeting with lawyers behind your husband's back. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Marcus stared at the photo, then at me, and I saw hurt flash across his features. I can explain that, I said, quietly knowing this revelation would cause pain, even though my intentions had been protective. You consulted a divorce lawyer. Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper. I met with Jennifer Walsh one time 6 months ago, I admitted. But not for the reason you think. Dorothy's eyes gleamed with malicious triumph. Finally, the truth comes out. I took a deep breath, knowing I had to be completely honest. I consulted her because Dorothy had been escalating her harassment. She had started making threats about trying to get custody of the children if she could prove I was an unfit mother. I needed to understand my legal rights if she actually tried to follow through. Tom leaned forward with interest. What kind of threats? She told me she was keeping a journal documenting every mistake I made as a mother. She said she had friends in social services who could investigate me. She threatened to tell Emma's school about my affair and get me banned from school events. George turned to stare at his sister with growing horror. Dorothy, please tell me you didn't actually threaten custody proceedings. Dorothy's silence was answer enough. Marcus rubbed his temples, processing this information. You went to a lawyer to protect our family, not to leave me. I would never leave you, I said firmly. But I needed to know how to protect the children if Dorothy's threats became legal action. Patricia looked through more photos, finding images of me at the grocery store, the gas station, even at Emma's school pickup line. Mom, you had Alita followed everywhere. This is stalking behavior. Ralph Morrison, the private investigator Dorothy had hired, had been thorough to the point of obsession. There were photos of me in places where no one should have expected privacy to be violated, outside the children's pediatrician's office, in the parking lot of Emma's dance class, even at my own mother's house during a family barbecue. Dorothy grabbed the envelope and shook it upside down, making sure every photo had fallen out. I paid that man $2,000 for 6 months of surveillance. There has to be evidence of cheating here. The amount she had spent on this invasion of privacy hit me like a physical blow. $2,000 was more than we spent on groceries for 3 months. George stared at his sister in disbelief. Where did you get $2,000, Dorothy? You've been claiming poverty every time Patricia tries to take you out for dinner. Dorothy's face went from flush to pale in seconds. She looked around the room like a trapped animal, realizing she had revealed more than she intended. Marcus's accounting mind immediately latched onto the financial discrepancy. Mom, you told me last month that you couldn't afford to fix your furnace. Where did you get money for a private investigator? The question hung in the air like smoke from a fire that was about to become an inferno. Dorothy's hands trembled as she gathered up the photographs. That's not important. What matters is that your wife was meeting with divorce lawyers behind your back. But Tom was studying something else in the scattered papers. His background in accounting made him notice details others missed. He picked up what looked like bank statements that had fallen out with the photos. Mrs. Caldwell, Tom said slowly, these appear to be statements from Emma's college savings account. Why were these in an envelope with private investigator photos? The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in Dorothy's hallway. Marcus reached for the bank statements with hands that shook worse than his mother's. As he scanned the numbers, his face went through several expressions: confusion, realization, and finally rage. Mom, Marcus said in a voice I had never heard before. Emma's college fund had $35,000 in it 6 months ago. According to this statement, there's $7,000 left. Dorothy sank into her rocking chair, as if her legs could no longer support her weight. Where is my daughter's college money? Marcus's voice was deadly quiet. Dorothy opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. That's when she made the decision that revealed the true depth of her desperation and manipulation. She clutched her chest dramatically and gasped, "My heart, I think I'm having a heart attack." Dorothy's dramatic gasp and clutch at her chest would have been convincing if Jake hadn't been watching her with the sharp eyes of someone who had been documenting her behavior for months. "She's faking," Jake said matter-of-factly, not moving from his position near the couch. "She does this every time Uncle George asks about her gambling." George's head snapped toward his nephew. "What do you mean, gambling?" But Dorothy was committed to her performance. She slumped in her rocking chair, breathing heavily and fanning herself with her hand. "Someone call 911. I can't breathe properly." Patricia immediately reached for her phone, but Tom caught her wrist gently. As a former EMT, he had seen real medical emergencies and fake ones. He approached Dorothy calmly. "Mrs. Caldwell, I'm going to check your pulse," Tom said, reaching for her wrist. Dorothy tried to pull away, but Tom was persistent. After 15 seconds, he announced, "Pulse is strong and regular. Heart rate is elevated, but consistent with stress, not cardiac distress." "I need to lie down," Dorothy insisted. But when Tom suggested calling her doctor to report the episode, she suddenly had enough energy to protest vigorously. "No, don't bother Dr. Williams with this. I just need rest." Jake crossed his arms. "She did the same thing when Uncle George found out about the casino trips. And when Dad asked about the missing money from Grandpa's estate last year." George's face darkened. "What missing money from Dad's estate?" Helen, who had been quietly comforting Emma, spoke up hesitantly. "George, remember when your mother's ring went missing from Dorothy's jewelry box? She claimed it was stolen. But then she had that mysterious heart episode when you wanted to call the police." Marcus was still holding the bank statements, his knuckles white with tension. "Mom, I need you to explain where $28,000 of my daughter's college fund went. Right now." Dorothy's medical emergency seemed to disappear as quickly as it had arrived. She sat up straighter in her chair, her face shifting from feigned weakness to defensive anger. "That money was spent protecting this family," Dorothy declared. "I paid Ralph Morrison to investigate your wife because I knew she was cheating again. A mother does what she has to do to protect her son." Patricia stared at her mother in horror. "You stole Emma's college fund to spy on Alita." "It wasn't stealing. I'm a joint owner on that account." Tom, still standing near Dorothy's chair, shook his head. "Using funds designated for a minor's education for personal expenses could be considered financial abuse, especially if the other account holder didn't consent to the withdrawals." Marcus's voice was dangerously quiet. "What else did you spend Emma's money on, Mom?" George leaned forward in his chair. "Dorothy, tell me you didn't go back to the casino." The question hit its target. Dorothy's defiance crumbled, and she looked away from her brother's disappointed gaze. Helen spoke up again, her voice sad rather than angry. "I wondered how you could afford those expensive earrings you wore to Thanksgiving dinner. You said they were costume jewelry." Jake pulled out his phone again. "I have a recording from last month, when Grandma Dorothy was talking to her friend Margot about winning big at the blackjack table." "Don't you dare!" Dorothy snapped, but Jake was already playing the audio. Dorothy's voice came through clearly. "I won $800 at the Riverside Casino last week. Finally, a good night after all those losses. Ralph says he's close to getting proof that Alita is cheating again, so every dollar I've invested in this investigation will be worth it when Marcus finally sees the truth." Marcus closed his eyes as if the sound of his mother's voice physically hurt him. "You gambled away my daughter's future." Emma, who had been quietly observing the adult drama with wide eyes, tugged on my sleeve. "Mommy, why is everyone angry about my college money?" The innocence of her question in the middle of this family destruction nearly broke my heart. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that her grandmother stole her educational future to fund a gambling addiction and a vindictive investigation? George stood up abruptly and walked to the window, his hands clenched into fists. Dorothy, Mom, and Dad saved for 50 years to leave us that inheritance. Dad specifically wanted money set aside for the great-grandchildren's education. How much of that is gone? Dorothy's silence stretched uncomfortably long. Helen answered for her speaking so quietly we almost missed it. She asked me for money for house repairs 3 months ago. I gave her $5,000. Patricia gasped. Mom, you told me you needed $3,000 for a new roof. Tom was putting pieces together with his accounting background. How much total are we talking about between the kids' college funds, inheritance money, and money borrowed from family? Marcus was frantically calculating figures on his phone. Emma's account is down $28,000. Jake, what's your balance showing? Jake, tech savvy as always, had already logged into his savings account app. Mine shows $15,000 missing too. The scope of Dorothy's financial betrayal was staggering. She had systematically raided the children's futures to feed her gambling addiction and fund her obsession with destroying my reputation. Marcus looked at his mother with an expression I had never seen before, complete disbelief mixed with fury. You stole over $40,000 from your own grandchildren. Dorothy tried one more desperate manipulation. Marcus, you don't understand the pressure I've been under. Watching you stay married to that woman knowing she could betray you again at any moment. The stress has been making me sick. I haven't been thinking clearly. But Emma, my sweet 6-year-old daughter who had started this morning excited about giving her grandmother a handmade gift, walked over to where Dorothy sat. In a voice that was pure innocence but devastating in its honesty, she said, Grandma Dorothy, my teacher says that taking things that don't belong to you is stealing even if you're sad. The child's simple moral clarity in the face of adult manipulation was the final blow that shattered Dorothy's remaining defenses. Dorothy's face crumpled when Emma spoke those words with such pure, innocent honesty. For a moment, I thought we might finally see genuine remorse from this woman who had caused so much pain to our family. Instead, Dorothy looked down at Emma and said, Little girls shouldn't talk about things they don't understand. That's when I found my voice. I had been silent through most of this nightmare, watching my family's drama unfold like a spectator at a car accident. But hearing Dorothy dismiss my daughter's simple moral statement flipped a switch inside me that I didn't know existed. Don't you dare! I said, standing up from the couch with a calm that surprised even me. Don't you dare speak to my daughter that way. Dorothy looked up at me with the same cold expression she had worn when she told Emma that children from Mommy's cheating didn't get to call her Grandma. Your daughter, Dorothy said with emphasis on the word your, is in this situation because of your choices. Everything that's happened to this family stems from your inability to keep your marriage vows. I walked closer to Dorothy's rocking chair, my voice steady and controlled in a way that made everyone in the room pay attention. You want to talk about choices, Dorothy? Let's talk about choices. Let's talk about your choice to steal $43,000 from your grandchildren's education funds. Let's talk about your choice to spend Emma's college money on private investigators and slot machines. Dorothy started to interrupt, but I continued without raising my voice. Let's talk about your choice to tell a 6-year-old child that she doesn't belong in her own family. Let's talk about your choice to tell Emma that her daddy isn't really her daddy because Mommy made bad choices. Marcus jerked his head toward his mother. You told Emma that I'm not her father? Jake pulled out his phone again, but I held up my hand to stop him. I didn't need recordings anymore. I had found my own voice. 3 months ago, I continued, Emma came home from a visit here crying because Dorothy told her that when mommies cheat, it means the babies might belong to someone else. Emma asked me if Marcus was really her daddy, or if she was like the kids on TV who have different daddies. The color drained from Marcus's face. Emma asked you that? She was 4 years old when I made my mistake, Dorothy. She had nothing to do with my affair. She was an innocent child who deserved to grow up feeling secure in her family's love. Instead, you chose to make her question her place in our family because you couldn't forgive me. Patricia had tears streaming down her face. Mom, how could you do that to a baby? George was shaking his head in disbelief. Dorothy, what happened to you? This isn't how we were raised. But I wasn't finished. Years of swallowing Dorothy's cruelty, years of making excuses for her behavior, years of watching my daughter's confidence erode under her grandmother's conditional love, it all came pouring out. You want to know about choices, Dorothy? Here's my choice. Emma has been seeing a child therapist for 6 months because she started having nightmares about not being good enough for her family. Dr. Patricia Henderson has documented Emma's anxiety symptoms, her regression in potty training, and her repeated questions about whether her family really loves her. Marcus looked stricken. Emma's been seeing a therapist. I didn't want to worry you with it because you already felt guilty about your mother's behavior. But yes, our 6-year-old daughter has been in therapy to deal with the emotional damage caused by her grandmother's rejection. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder that I had brought with me, planning for this confrontation more carefully than Dorothy realized. Dr. Henderson's notes document Emma saying things like, Grandma Dorothy says I'm different from Jake because Mommy was bad. And maybe if I'm really good, Grandma Dorothy will love me like she loves Jake. Helen was openly sobbing now, and even Tom looked shaken by the clinical evidence of a child's psychological pain. Dorothy tried to interrupt again. You can't blame me for that child's emotional problems. Children have nightmares all the time. This isn't just nightmares, Dorothy. This is a documented pattern of emotional abuse toward a child, and I have more documentation than you might expect. I opened my folder and spread out my own collection of evidence across the coffee table right next to Dorothy's scattered private investigator photos. These are screenshots of text messages you sent to Marcus, where you referred to me as that whore, and the family destroyer, messages that Emma could read when you handed Marcus his phone. These are witness statements from neighbors who heard you tell Mrs. Patterson at the mailbox that Emma doesn't count as a real granddaughter. Patricia grabbed one of the printed text messages and read it aloud. Dorothy, you wrote, I can't stand looking at that bastard child, knowing what her mother did to break up our family. This is about Emma. This is about a 6-year-old little girl. Marcus took the phone screenshots from Patricia's hands, reading his mother's words with growing horror. Mom, you called my daughter a bastard child. Dorothy's face had gone completely pale. Those were private messages sent in a moment of anger. Private messages about my child. Private messages calling Emma a bastard. Private messages questioning her legitimacy in our family. Marcus's voice was rising with each word. George looked at the evidence spread across the table and stood up from his chair. Dorothy, I've seen enough. This isn't grief over Dad's death or concern for Marcus. This is just cruelty. Helen wiped her eyes and looked directly at Dorothy. We can't support this behavior anymore. This has to stop. That's when I made the announcement that changed everything. It is going to stop, I said with quiet certainty. Because I'm filing charges against Dorothy for financial theft harassment and child emotional abuse. I'm also filing for a restraining order to protect Emma from further psychological damage. The silence that followed was deafening. Dorothy stared at me as if I had slapped her across the face. You can't do that. I'm Marcus's mother. I'm family. Family doesn't steal from children. Family doesn't emotionally abuse grandchildren, and family certainly doesn't spend a child's college fund on gambling and private investigators. I reached back into my folder and pulled out legal documents that I had prepared weeks ago. These are restraining order papers, already filled out and ready to file. These are reports I've compiled for the district attorney's office regarding the financial theft. And this, I held up a thick manila envelope, contains a year's worth of documentation showing a pattern of harassment and emotional abuse toward a minor child. Marcus stared at the legal documents in my hands. Alita, when did you prepare all this? I started documenting everything 6 months ago when Emma first started showing signs of anxiety. I hoped I would never need to use it, but Dorothy's behavior has escalated to the point where I have to protect our daughter. Patricia looked at her mother with a mixture of sadness and disgust. Mom, you brought this on yourself. George nodded grimly. Dorothy, if you had just been a normal grandmother, instead of punishing an innocent child for something that had nothing to do with her, none of this would be happening. Dorothy looked around the room desperately searching for an ally who wasn't there. Finally, her gaze landed on Emma, who had been quietly listening to the grown-ups discuss her therapy and her grandmother's mean words. Emma walked over to Dorothy's chair one more time. In her sweet 6-year-old voice, she said, "It's okay, Grandma Dorothy. My real family loves me enough for everybody." Then she took my hand and asked, "Mommy, can we go home now?" Dorothy's face crumpled completely, and she began to cry real tears for the first time that day. Emma's innocent words, "My real family loves me enough for everybody," hit Dorothy harder than any legal threat or family confrontation could have. Watching my 6-year-old daughter offer forgiveness while simultaneously declaring her own worth was the most powerful moment I had ever witnessed. But I wasn't moved to mercy by Dorothy's tears. I had watched my daughter cry too many times because of this woman's cruelty. "We are going home," I told Emma gently, "but first Mommy needs to finish talking to the grown-ups." I turned back to face Dorothy, who was wiping her eyes with a tissue Helen had handed her. The tears seemed genuine, but I had learned not to trust Dorothy's emotional displays. "These documents," I said, holding up the legal papers again, "represent 6 months of preparation. I didn't want our family to reach this point, but you left me no choice." Marcus was reading through the restraining order paperwork, his expression growing more serious with each page. "This is very thorough. You've documented everything." Dr. Henderson's therapy notes show a clear pattern of trauma symptoms in Emma that correlate directly with visits to this house. Emma's anxiety levels spike every time she knows she has to see Dorothy. Patricia leaned forward to look at the paperwork. "What exactly are you asking for in the restraining order?" "No unsupervised contact with Emma until Dorothy completes a psychological evaluation and anger management counseling. No contact with Emma at all if Dorothy refuses treatment. And full restitution of the stolen college funds, plus interest." Tom nodded approvingly. "That seems reasonable given the circumstances. The financial theft alone could result in criminal charges." George was studying the bank statements that were still scattered on the coffee table. "Dorothy, you understand that what you did with those college funds is felony theft, right? We're not talking about a family disagreement anymore. We're talking about actual crimes." Dorothy looked up from her tissue with panic in her eyes. "You can't send me to jail. I'm an old woman. I made mistakes, but I'm family." "You're a family member who committed felonies against children," I replied calmly. "The district attorney's office doesn't usually make exceptions for grandmothers who steal from their grandchildren." Marcus set down the paperwork and looked directly at his mother. "Mom, I want you to understand something clearly. I am completely supporting Alida's decision to pursue legal action against you." Dorothy's face went white. Marcus, you can't choose her over your own mother. I'm not choosing Alita over you. I'm choosing to protect my children from someone who has shown herself to be harmful to their emotional and financial well-being. The fact that you happen to be my mother doesn't give you the right to abuse my family. Helen spoke up quietly from her corner of the room. Dorothy, George, and I will testify on behalf of Alita and the children if necessary. What you've done is inexcusable. Patricia nodded firmly. I'll testify too. Emma is my niece, and I've watched you treat her differently from Jake for years. I thought it would get better over time, but it's only gotten worse. Tom cleared his throat. My accounting firm has experience with financial fraud cases. We'd be happy to help document the stolen funds and calculate interest and penalties. Dorothy looked around the room, finally realizing that she had no allies left. Even her own brother and daughter were prepared to testify against her. I can pay the money back, Dorothy said desperately. I'll sell the house if I have to. Just don't send me to jail. I had anticipated this response. Paying the money back is the minimum requirement, not a favor you're doing for us. You stole $43,000 from your grandchildren. That money needs to be replaced with interest. Marcus was calculating figures on his phone again. At current savings account interest rates, we're looking at approximately $47,000 for full restitution. Dorothy's eyes widened. I don't have that kind of money. George sighed heavily. You'll have to sell the house, Dorothy, and you'll have to get help for your gambling addiction. There are programs available, Helen added gently, but you have to want to get better. Patricia looked at her mother with sad determination. Mom, I love you, but I can't enable this behavior anymore. If you don't get help, you'll lose all of us. Dorothy turned to Marcus with one last desperate plea. Marcus, please. I raised you. I loved you. Don't let her destroy our family. Marcus's response was firm and final. You destroyed our family when you chose to hurt innocent children. Emma and Jake are my priority now. If you want any relationship with us in the future, you'll accept the consequences of your actions and get the help you need. I felt a surge of love and pride for my husband. After years of being caught between his mother's cruelty and his loyalty to family, Marcus was finally choosing to protect our children without reservation. Emma tugged on my sleeve again. Mommy, is Grandma Dorothy going to be nicer to me now? I knelt down to Emma's eye level, choosing my words carefully. Grandma Dorothy has to learn how to be nice before she can spend time with you again. But you don't have to worry about that. Your job is just to be a happy little girl. Emma nodded seriously, then walked over to Jake and hugged his legs. Thank you for protecting me with your phone, Jake. Jake hugged his sister back. That's what big brothers are for Emma. Dorothy watched this interaction between her grandchildren with something that might have been regret, but I was done trying to interpret her emotions. I'll be filing these papers with the court on Monday morning, I announced. Dorothy, you'll receive official notification within a week. I suggest you use that time to find a lawyer and a therapist. Marcus gathered up the bank statements and legal documents. We're leaving now. Mom, don't contact us until you've spoken with an attorney about restitution and enrolled in a treatment program. George nodded grimly. Dorothy, Patricia, and I will help you find appropriate resources, but we won't enable this behavior anymore. As we prepared to leave, Emma walked back to where her broken angel ornament lay on the floor. She picked up the pieces carefully and looked at them with the concentration she had shown while making the ornament weeks earlier. It's okay, little angel, she whispered to the broken ceramic. Sometimes broken things can be fixed, but sometimes we just have to make new ones. Then she dropped the pieces in Dorothy's trash can and took my hand. I'm ready to go home now, Mommy. 6 months later, I'm sitting in our backyard watching Emma and Jake play on the swing set Marcus installed in the spring. Emma's laughter carries across the yard, clear and untroubled in a way that reminds me why I fought so hard to protect her innocence. The legal proceedings moved quickly once Dorothy realized the extent of evidence against her. Her attorney advised her to accept a plea agreement, rather than face trial for multiple felony theft charges. She received 1 year of probation, mandatory gambling addiction counseling, and a court order for full restitution. Dorothy sold her house to pay back the $47,000 she owed to the children's college funds. George helped her find a small apartment closer to the treatment center, where she attends Gamblers Anonymous meetings twice weekly. The restraining order remains in effect until Dorothy completes a psychological evaluation and demonstrates sustained behavioral change. Dr. Patricia Henderson, Emma's therapist, will evaluate any future contact to ensure Emma's emotional well-being remains protected. Marcus and I have grown stronger through this crisis in ways I never expected. The night we came home from that terrible Christmas morning, he sat me down at our kitchen table and apologized for not protecting our family from his mother's cruelty sooner. I was so focused on keeping peace between you and my mother that I forgot my first responsibility was to protect my children, he said. Emma should never have endured that treatment. We started attending couples therapy sessions again, not because our marriage was in crisis, but because we wanted to build even better communication skills. Dr. Sarah Mitchell helped us develop strategies for presenting a united front when dealing with difficult family situations. Jake has shown remarkable maturity throughout this entire process. He continues to be protective of Emma, but he's also learned that adults should handle adult problems. We've made sure he understands that documenting Dorothy's abuse was the right thing to do, but that going forward, he should tell us immediately if any adult makes him or his sister uncomfortable. Emma's progress in therapy has been remarkable. Dr. Henderson says her anxiety symptoms have virtually disappeared since Dorothy's harassment stopped. Emma no longer has nightmares about not being good enough for her family. She's back to being a typical 6-year-old who worries about normal things, like whether her tooth fairy payment is fair market rate. Patricia has maintained a relationship with our family while setting firm boundaries with her mother. She visits us regularly and has become a wonderful aunt figure for both children. She was honest with Emma about Grandma Dorothy's problems, explaining in age-appropriate terms that sometimes grown-ups make bad choices that hurt other people. Tom helped us restructure all of our financial accounts to ensure no one else has access to the children's college funds. The money Dorothy stole has been repaid with interest, and both accounts are actually larger now than they were before the theft. George and Helen have become surrogate grandparents for Emma and Jake. They attend school events, remember birthdays, and treat both children with the unconditional love that Dorothy never provided. Emma calls them Great Uncle George and Great Aunt Helen, and their faces light up every time she says it. 3 weeks ago, Dorothy sent a letter through her attorney requesting supervised visits with the children. The letter was professionally written and included documentation that she had completed her court-ordered counseling programs. Marcus and I read the letter together and decided that Dorothy's desire to see the children was still focused on what she wanted rather than what was best for them. The letter talked about her loneliness and her regret, but it didn't demonstrate understanding of the specific harm she had caused to Emma. We wrote back through our attorney, explaining that any future contact would require Dorothy to complete additional therapy specifically focused on child development and emotional abuse. She would also need to write individual letters to Emma and Jake that demonstrated genuine understanding of how her actions affected them, not just how her actions made her feel. So far, we haven't received a response to those requirements. My work at the Sunrise Women's Shelter has taken on new meaning since our family crisis. I now facilitate support groups for mothers who are protecting their children from emotionally abusive family members. It's surprisingly common for grandparents, aunts, uncles, and even estranged fathers to use children as weapons in family conflicts. I share my story carefully when appropriate, always emphasizing that protecting children sometimes requires difficult decisions that feel like betrayal of family loyalty. But children's emotional safety must come first, even when the abuser is someone who should love them unconditionally. Emma recently started first grade, and her teacher comments regularly on her confidence and social skills. She makes friends easily and stands up for other children when they're being treated unfairly. She has learned that her worth is not dependent on other people's approval. Jake is in 7th grade now and has developed into a thoughtful, protective young man. He recently wrote a school essay about his sister that made Marcus and I cry. He wrote, "My sister Emma is the bravest person I know because she stayed kind even when someone was mean to her for no good reason." Last week, Emma made another angel ornament in her art class at school. This one has silver wings and a gold halo, and she presented it to me with enormous pride. "This one is for you, Mommy," she said, "because you're my guardian angel who protects me from mean people." The ornament sits on our kitchen windowsill, where the morning light makes the wings sparkle. Every time I see it, I remember that protecting the people we love sometimes requires us to make difficult choices that feel scary in the moment, but prove to be exactly right in the long run. Emma has learned that real families are built on love, respect, and protection, not just shared DNA. She knows that her parents will always choose her well-being over anyone else's feelings, including their own comfort. That's the lesson I want her to carry forward, that she deserves relationships where she feels valued, respected, and cherished, exactly as she is. No one should ever make her question her worth or her place in the people who love her. Sometimes protecting your family means cutting ties with people who refuse to treat them with basic human dignity. It's painful, but children deserve to grow up feeling secure in their family's love, not constantly proving they deserve it. What would you do if someone in your family was emotionally abusing your child? How far would you go to protect your children from toxic relatives? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear about your experiences with difficult family situations. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about family challenges and triumphs. And if you know someone who might benefit from hearing about setting boundaries with toxic family members, please share this video with them. Thank you for listening to my story and supporting families who have to make these difficult choices. Remember that you deserve relationships built on love and respect, and your children deserve the same. Take care of yourselves and each other.